everybody. I cannot tell you how happy I am to see everybody here. This is a good crowd. So I'm so pleased about that because we have not just regionally renowned, but I mean, this lady has got a following and we're just so fortunate to be able to bring her here. So I'm very pleased to introduce Barbara Hamm. She is the host at WHRV of Another View, which is on Friday between noon and 1. And for those of you who haven't caught it and want to hear a unique perspective on African American life and concerns in Tidewater or nationally, you should tune it in at least every so often because it's also health issues, and that's another one of their focuses. She's held the position of Project Director for the National Federation of Community Broadcasters African American Public Radio Stations Initiative, working on compliance, governance, development, programming, and community engagement. She served as Creative Services Officer, Chief Communications Officer, Chief Public Affairs Officer, and Chief Community Engagement Officer, all with WHRO. Was there anything left that you could do in there? So prior to that, she held management positions with Communications Technology, Inc. in Prince George's County, the Maryland Police Department, and Hamm and Fox Communications. Most of her career has been spent in television management, including news director for WTKR-TV in Norfolk, Virginia, KYW-TV in Philadelphia, WJLA-TV in Washington, Black Entertainment, or BET, as we sometimes have heard, WJZ-TV and WBAL-TV in Baltimore. She's currently chair of the Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing Authority, the second vice chair of YWCA Southampton Roads, chair of Norfolk Education Foundation Board of Directors, chair of the Community Advisory Board for Dominion Virginia Power, and board member of the Planning Council and Bennett College Alumni Association. She's been recognized for her work in the community, including being named by the YWCA SHR as a 2010 Woman of Distinction. And I'm going to skip over her other awards with the Girl Scouts, the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities, the Martin Luther King Community Service Award, and Volunteer of the Year Award. So we were talking about being so-called retired and just how much involved you get in everything. Barbara is a native of Baltimore, is married to Maxie Lee, has 2 daughters and a granddaughter, loves to spend time with family and friends. She's a graduate of Bennett College, summa cum laude, and attends First Baptist Church in Berkeley. So please join me in welcoming Barbara Hamm.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Or afternoon now, I guess, huh? Let me...
Is that coming on?
There it is. There it is. How's that? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to come out this afternoon. Well, one thing I've learned, Sue, first of all, since you are so organized, and we've been talking about this for about a year, a lot has happened in that year. Since then, mainly that in June of this year, WHRO went through some changes, and I was brought on instead of a full-time employee as a contract employee to continue to do Another View, and I have started my own company, and it is called Sharing Info LLC. Thank you. And it is a media and communications company, and I have learned how to manage multiple projects at the same time. Well, not learned, but now I really have to do it. And so this is a treat to be able to just come out and have some conversation with folks. So thank you very, very much for inviting me. So my topic is why can't we all get along? And I thought a lot about this topic because obviously on Another View, we discuss today's issues from an African American perspective. And there's a lot of things that are happening in our country right now that keep us from coming together. And my goal, and my producer Lisa Godley and our audio engineer Victor Bowen, our goal is to engage in conversation that will bring people together, that we hope will at least open minds and hearts and make people think. And that's our goal. So back in 1987, I was a producer at WJZ TV. Actually, I was an executive producer, and we were doing a series of stories on neighborhoods. If you know anything about Baltimore, you know that Baltimore is known for its neighborhoods. And there was a particular neighborhood, Rogers Forge, which is a very historic neighborhood, and it was continuing to make history because in 1987, in Rogers Forge, for the first time, they had elected a woman as chair of the Civic League. Now, prior to, women were only allowed to belong to the Garden Club, and men were only allowed to belong to the Civic League. So this was a big deal that Jean, who was the first woman to become president of the Civic League. And so we wanted to highlight Rogers Forge, we wanted to highlight Jean and all of her accomplishments. And Jean and I have been talking on the phone for about a week because it takes a while to set up, you know, when we're coming and what kind of pictures we're going to take and what's the angle of the stories and so forth. And so doing the things that producers do, she and I had many conversations. And on that Friday, we were going to her house on a Monday. And on that Friday, I called her just to reconfirm, make sure everything was in place. And Jean says, "Oh, Barbara, I'm so excited that you all are coming to my house. Now tell me again, who's coming to my house?" So I said, well, it'll be myself, the producer, and an audio engineer, and we have a person we call a grip that helps us carry the equipment, and a photographer, and our anchor, Denise Cope. And Jean says, "Okay, that's fine. But I hope none of those people are black. I hate black people." Well, I'm holding the phone. And I was so stunned, I literally could not respond. And I said, "Jean, I need to call you back." And I hung up because I really had to sit there and process for a moment in 1987 that this person just said that to me. And so I called my crew in and I said, "This is what happened." And as they were coming into my office, the phone rings. And I answer the phone, and it's Jean. And she says, "Barbara, you know, I was thinking about our conversation, and I think that you may have misunderstood me." She said, "It's not that I hate black people. Actually, they make me laugh." Well, then that pissed me off. Because now you're calling me a buffoon. You're calling me not serious, okay? And I said, "Jean," I said, "I'm coming to your house on Monday, and I'm black." Oh my God, I thought I was talking to a white woman. I guess because I speak the King's English. At any rate, Monday comes along, I tell my crew what's going on. My audio engineer is African American, and he refused to step foot on her property. So he ran audio from across the street, okay? And the photographer set up the microphone for him. We got to her door, and Jean opened the door, and you could tell she was just so nervous. She was just so nervous. And so she says, "Well, my husband says that you can only come in the living room. That's the only place you can go." And I said, "Well, Jean," I said, "I need to look around. I need to make sure that we put you in the best light and that we shoot you with the prettiest setting around you and so forth. So I need to look around." And so the devil got into me, and I went through that house and I touched everything that I could put my hands on. At any rate, we sat down, we did the interview with Jean, and after it was over, she said, "This was a fabulous experience." And I'm feeling pretty good because I'm thinking I've shown a different side. Obviously, she's had some issues, and I'm showing her a different side of a person of color. And she says, "You know what, Barbara, as a matter of fact, I am so excited about what happened that I'm going to invite you to our Christmas party. We have a huge Christmas party for Rogers Forge. But if you're late, I'm going to put a broom in your hand." And at that point, I said to myself, clearly, this woman is a product of her upbringing. She is a product of whatever experiences she has had, and it's her issue. Because I could have really gone, nuclear black on her, but I didn't. We just thanked her, and we went and we did our story. I tell you that story because it was probably the catalyst in my professional career that made me the person that I am today, and why Another View and why these conversations are very important to me. So I grew up in Baltimore. Our family was the second black family to move into our block on Woodland Avenue, which was a predominantly, at that time, white and Jewish area. When I went to Pimlico Elementary School, I was the only African-American child in the class when I started in kindergarten. By the time I got to 6th grade, it was about 50-50. By the time I went through high school, it was probably majority black at that point. So I got a chance to experience white flight in all of its reality. My mother worked for Baltimore City Public Schools. My dad was a police officer with the Harbor Tunnel toll police, so for the state of Maryland. He was the first African American to make captain in that arena. And so my parents always taught my sister and I just to be proud of who we are, to do the very best that we can, and to understand that people are people. That's what they taught us. And so that's the life that we tried to live. Now, my sister, who's the genius in the family because she finished her master's degree at 21, I just skipped 12th grade, so she's the real smart one. But my sister and I were so different because she was Miss Birkenstock wearing dreads down to her behind still today, which are gorgeous, animal loving, vegetarian, vegan, interracial dating, the whole nine. And I am, give me a steak, give me a brother, and Miss Black Power all the way. And so it's just interesting, the dichotomy between two people growing up in the same household and how different we were. But yet our experiences melded in terms of we both tied ribbons to the car when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated and put black ribbons on our door because that's what you were told to do in order to keep your house from being burned down during the riots in Baltimore. Okay, when the city exploded because of the frustration and because of the anger and the lack of opportunity for a group of people. And so I experienced that, and I can still smell the smoke in the air as we look at the 50th anniversary of his assassination coming up. And I think about watching people who looted and watching them run through the streets carrying the things that they took and trying to understand, as a student asked me when I spoke at Norfolk Academy, why would you burn your own house? But can you imagine being so frustrated that that house doesn't belong to you and that nothing in your life belongs to you, and yet you have all this pressure pulled upon you? And it was a reaction. And if we aren't careful and we don't start doing some things differently, we're going to have that reaction again. And that is something that I try in my own small way to fight against every single day. But growing up, I learned my experience with Gene. When I came here to the Hampton Roads, I became a news director. I'd started at WTKR in 1993 as an assistant news director. I became news director the next year. At that point in time, out of the 212 television markets in the country, there were 20 African-American news directors, meaning the person who controls the newsroom and who sets the budget and who decides on a daily basis what's going to air on the newscasts and so forth. There were 20 of us, 19 men and me in the top 50 markets. So I've had firsts. I've either been a first or an only in many, many situations. And it is always amusing to me, especially when I have people say to me, well, what does the black community think about that? Well, the thing we try to prove and show on Another View is that, guess what? We have a variety of thoughts. We're not a monolith. You know, we are a vibrant, live community, just like every other community. And we have some people who are super successful, and we have some people who are living life day to day and loving life, and we have some people who are struggling through life just like everyone else. And so as you go through, and we're covering things and we're talking about things, when we look at, you know, the Trayvon Martins and the Philando Castiles and people who are being attacked by police, when we say Black Lives Matter and the dilution, because, well, all lives matter. Well, of course all lives matter. But the point is, we're trying to say, pay attention, because right now you have a group of people in this country who are still struggling. On the show last Friday, our roundtable, which, by the way, Another View is not leaving. The roundtable is just done, unfortunately, because most of our members have, after 9 years of showing up every second Friday of the month, they just have gotten a little tired, and life has gotten in the way. But in last week's show, someone said, Roger said, I believe, he said, think about it. Really, we've only had about 50 years or so of true, if you want to call it, freedom in terms of laws, in terms of like getting rid of the Jim Crow laws, in terms of legally saying that we are equal and that we are a part of America. And so it's going to take time. But I'm positive that we don't have a lot of time, and that we have to do things just like this room today. We have to come together, and we have to understand each other and learn to love each other, learn to listen to each other, and learn, hopefully, to develop a sense of comprehension and a sense of compassion and a sense of empathy for each other. And it's not just one way. It's not just whites to blacks. It's blacks to whites also. And then I know that there are other groups that are involved too. We have Latinos and we have all kinds of minorities in this country, and I get that. But the one thing that if you're an ally of racial harmony and so forth, please understand that African Americans have had a unique experience unlike any of the other minorities that are in this country. You know, because the other ones were not shackled, and were not brought over and shipped in slave ships, and were not kept from being a full citizen for years and years and years and years. So I came up with an acronym, and I need to look at it again, because it says, teach love. And I was thinking of what could I say to you all that would kind of give you some thought in terms of how to address the racial issues that we face in today's society. So teach love. The T is teach our children not to hate. I'll give you an example. North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro, North Carolina. It's the largest HBCU in the country, historically black college and university in the country, graduates more engineers than any other university in this country, okay? And the tennis team went to Appalachian State University in order to play and compete. And these two players were competing against each other, one black, one white. And the black tennis player was winning. And the white tennis player said to him, well, at least I know who my father is. Now, this is a college student. So he hasn't, like an 18, 19-year-old college student. So he hasn't had enough life experience to come to that on his own. Somebody had to teach him that. And if we're not careful when, because look at little children. And you see little 2- and 3-year-olds come together, they aren't worried about what color they are. They just play together. But as they are raised and as they are surrounded by people who don't want to spread the truth and spread love as opposed to hate, then you get comments like, at least I know who my father was. So we need to teach our children not to hate. We need the E for embrace differences. Be curious. Ask questions. You know, I would much rather someone, and I hear this a lot, especially when I speak with predominantly white audiences, when they say, you know, I really would love to know about something, but I'm afraid to ask. I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. Well, you know what? I'd much rather you ask, and I think most people would much rather you ask than to walk away with an assumption that's not correct. You know, we're pretty friendly people. We're pretty accommodating people for the most part. And we will answer the question. Ask the question if you don't understand something. It's okay to do that, okay? Accept the A, accept differences without fear, okay? Accept the fact that we are all not the same. We are all human. That's what brings us together. That's the tying force. But we have different cultures, we have different values, we have different mores, we have different ways of doing things. And so just because my way may be a little different than your way, doesn't make either one of our way wrong. It just means that this is the way we do things. And if you really want to understand, well, why is it that you do it that way? Then let's have a conversation about it. Because people coming together find more commonalities than they find differences, ultimately. The C, challenge those who have racist views. We have more people who would rather just go, and then they'll go over in their little corner and go, girl, did you hear that? Challenge them. You know, don't allow people to say things that you know are wrong. If it makes that little tingle in your back happen, and yet that gut feeling happen, then you gotta have the courage to speak up and say, you know what, while you're in my presence, we won't talk about people like that, or we won't accept that word. You know, we will speak respectfully of each other. H, hone in on the good. Find the commonalities. You know, I was just watching, I observed people, and I observed how people come into the room and how you all talk to each other and interacted. And weren't we in that class together? Didn't we do that writing class together? Find the commonalities, because that's where the fun comes in. The L, learn as much as you can about the other culture before you judge. You know, so if you want to know how come people in the black community tend to gather together on the porch and they have music going and they tend to hang out, ask them. Because we are a communal people. We like to come together. We like to do things together. You know, so there's a reason behind it. It's not just that we're trying to be loud. You know, we're an expressive people. You know, so we don't necessarily, we're not necessarily quiet all the time. But if you ask the question, then you will, and learn as much as you can, it will make more sense to you. O stands for observe your own behavior. You know, all of us do something wrong. I will tell you a true story that I did, and I'm mortified every time I think about it. We were working in the newsroom at Jay-Z, a lot of experiences at Jay-Z, and I was talking with one of the executive producers, and she was talking about going to a flea market and what a great deal that she got on an item. And I said, oh, but you had to Jew them down. Dead wrong. Dead wrong. And you know what? The Jewish man in the room, another executive producer, called me on it. And I mean, he called me on it. He said, I can't believe you, of all people. But he was right. But he was right. We all make mistakes. But I'd rather he do that, because you know what? I have never said that phrase again, unless I'm in example. But I don't speak that way any longer, because he pointed out to me the reason why and why it was hurtful. So let's do that for each other. So that's the O. The V, validate the inherent goodness in others who are different from you. You know, so if you go and you're speaking with someone, and so maybe they don't have a great command of the English language the way that you do, or maybe they don't dress as well as you do, or whatever, but look for the inherent good in the person. All that stuff is external. What's going on in their heart? You know, what are they the kind of person that would give you the shirt off their back? You know, are they the kind of person that will do anything to help you, to assist you? Don't look down on them. And for goodness sake, I'm working with the St. Paul's Project. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but the St. Paul's Project in Norfolk is roughly 200 acres of land right outside of downtown Norfolk that eventually is going to be redeveloped and reimagined. Inside that 200 acres are 3 public housing units: Tidewater Gardens, Calvert Square, and Young Terrace. That's about 4,500 people, about 2,200 of which are children. And eventually, they're going to have to move. Now, they have 3 choices. They can take a housing choice voucher, and we will assist them with finding market rate housing throughout wherever they want to go. They don't have to stay in Norfolk. They can go anywhere. Or they can move to another public housing unit if they're more comfortable doing that. Or they can stay in the St. Paul's area, but they may have to move as the redevelopment happens. But this is a huge 10-year or more revitalization of this area. Everybody's screaming gentrification. People aren't going to be able to come back. They're not going to be able to afford it. And this time, 2 things are happening. One is a program called People First, which is a program where every household within these 3 communities will have a case manager, and they will be given the tools that they need. So if they need job training, if they need more education, if they need health care, if they need mental health services, whatever it is that they need in order to reach the goals that they set for themselves. And the difference is this case manager will stay with these folks for 3 to 5 years after whatever the move is, to guarantee and to help them to navigate and become more fully self-sufficient. So People First is going to happen. And 2, we are building public housing, affordable housing, and market rate housing in the St. Paul's area. But the comments that you see in the paper and the things that people say in person to some people's face because you are poor are just horrifying. We've got to stop not only the racial divide, but the economic divide too. You know, everybody, and you know, this whole, well, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. Well, guess what? There were a lot of laws in this country that made sure that a certain group of people could not pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You know, and even today, you know, as we look at 50 years anniversary of the Kerner Commission, and we look at the things that they talked about with the Kerner Commission and how we were headed towards 2 societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. And when you look at poor people in particular, and because in our area poor people translates into black people for the most part, then you see that divide very, very clearly. And we've got to stop blaming them for being poor, and we've got to provide ways for them to pull up and out. Nobody wakes up in the morning going, I think I'll go live in public housing today. Trust me. I don't know if you've ever been inside a public housing unit, but see these walls? That's what their walls look like. They paint them themselves to give it more of a home feel. But there's not a drywall anywhere. It floods, and it floods badly. The one lady said at a community meeting, you know what, all our children know how to swim because that's the only way they can get to school when it's raining, when it floods. A thunderstorm, done. So all of that has to be mitigated. But we've got to stop blaming the victim, and we've got to start helping instead. And finally, E, have empathy for other people. Put yourself in their shoes. Think about how you would feel if this were happening to you and how you would want people to respond to you. What is it that you would want them to say? How would you want to be treated? Have empathy for others. Because at the end of the day, teach love, because love is the universal language. And now I'll take questions. Thank you so very much. Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions about people first. Is that, I was just sitting here thinking about the case managers and how many people they're going to have. You know,
Per.
Yeah. Is it grant money?
No, actually, the city of Norfolk is devoting $3 million per year. And obviously the budget has to be approved. That hasn't been approved yet, but that's what's being requested. And they are going to have to hire new caseworkers. This is not through Department of Social Services because they can't handle this overload. So there's going to be a whole new group of folks that will be brought in, and companies, RFPs will go out and so forth for services. So that we can make sure that people can get to it. And the caseload is supposed to be much, much less than what they currently, have.
Sometimes they drown in that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
My
your second
question is, could you tell us a little bit about there was a forum at Virginia Wesleyan recently that you moderated?
Yes.
Can
Yes.
you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, that's our Race Let's Talk About It forum, and that was an outgrowth of Another View when, right after Trayvon Martin happened. And Lisa and I are very attuned to the community. We're out and about in the community all the time. And people were really starting to talk about, you know, what's going on with police and black men. And she and I have our personal mantra that we can't stand seeing black guys in handcuffs because that's what you see on TV news. And I was a news director, so guilty too. Tried not to, but we really wanted to give the community an opportunity to talk because we felt we could feel the tensions rising, but nobody was really talking to each other. So that was the 8th one that we've done, and this past one was is Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy just a dream? And we're talking about civility and how our society has become so uncivil lately, particularly in. Actually, I take it back to once President Obama was elected, because it seems to be this whole thing about how now that President Trump is in office that all of a sudden we're uncivil. But there were some horrible things going on in 2008 and up also. And so we talked about how do we get back to creating a civil society. These are, by the way, open to everyone. They're free. We do 4 per year. We've talked about everything from the flag is down, now what? If you remember when South Carolina brought the flag down, to we've talked about white privilege. We've talked about race and politics, race and religion. The last one we just did on civility. And so we're always looking for ideas and for topics. But we really generate it based on what's happening in our society and what are people struggling with. And we try to bring them together. So we usually average about 100, 120 people or so. And so far, so good. Good conversations, yeah. Other guys, yes, ma'am.
Back to your St. Paul.
I can't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Will the option be given to some of those individuals that could possibly do this? As home ownership?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, there is a program, the Family Self-Sufficiency program. The question was, is there a program if people want to actually buy a home when they're about to move out of the St. Paul's area? And there is a program that is already in place, and we will be expanding that program so that those who are interested in home ownership, working with them to teach them what they need to do in terms of savings and in terms of all the paperwork and the process in order to buy a home. So yes, that is definitely an option. Each family gets to decide on its own. We're not going in there and telling them, okay, here's what you're going to do. You know, they get to decide on their own what are the goals for our family. And you know, some people, it's really funny. Some people have asked, for example, that if they move, can like their block move together? Because they're all neighbors, and they all know each other, and they all go to church together, and they all, you know, and some people were very surprised at that, and I'm looking at them like, you know what, just because your economic circumstance may not be that great, that doesn't mean that you don't have community, and that you know, this is your neighborhood, this is your home, these are the people that watch out for your kids, and you watch out for theirs, and everything else that everybody else does in their community. And so, it's just an opportunity for each family to say, this is what we'd like to do, this is what we'd like to achieve, and then we try to help them to get there. Yes, ma'am. Is there a website that you can find most of the stuff that you've been talking about?
In terms of St. Paul's, okay, we are working on a website right now, and hopefully will be set up soon. However, there is a Facebook page, and it's called St. Paul's Area /NFK for Norfolk. So St. Paul's Area, PAULS, area /Norfolk.
Okay, what about the discussion groups that you were?
For Race Let's Talk About It, all of that is on anotherviewradio.org or whro.org/talkaboutrace. And by the way, on that page, on our Talk About Race page, there is a toolkit for you to use if you want to hold conversations within your own homes or communities or churches or whatever, and you're curious about how do we make this thing work and so forth. We have a toolkit there. We have videos that you can show. There are talking points. There are ways to calm folks down if people get a little too excited, and still maintain a good conversation. It's okay for people to become emotional or to argue a point, but you still want to remain respectful. Yes, ma'am.
What are the plans for those areas you're talking about? Is it mixed use?
Mixed use, yes. Mixed use, mixed commercial use, mixed income housing, parks, flood mitigation. So that may mean lakes to hold the water. We don't know yet. The plans have not been finalized yet, but the good thing also is that the city manager and the mayor have made a promise to the residents that they will be a part of that planning process. There is a advisory group that is headed up by Councilman Paul Riddick and Councilwoman Angela Williams-Graves in Norfolk, who will oversee everything that happens within the St. Paul's area. So, and there are residents on that advisory group also.
So are any of the plans to include high-end residents?
Yes, it will be. It'll go from the top, from market rate all the way to public housing. Okay. Yeah, so there'll be a little bit of everything in there. Yes, ma'am.
There's been a lot of publicity about the special group, the housing for all the sewage and everything was backing up. Do they get preferential treatment?
Yeah, the sewage and so forth, that was in Young Terrace, I believe, is where that happened. And they are, first of all, that's just old infrastructure. That's part of the problem. Also, why this area has to be revitalized, because these houses were built in the 50s, and the sewage lines and all that are even older. So they are patchworking to fix it until things can happen. It moves slowly. I mean, they've been talking about revitalizing this area probably for the past 10 years or longer. But Mayor Alexander has been the one to say, you know what, we have to make this happen, and we've got to make it happen now.
Just to go back to your acronym.
Teach Love.
Change the subject a little bit.
Okay.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, you said to teach. The T is to teach.
Teach the children not to hate.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I think hatred of some things is not bad, because it gives you a passion to defend and to move and act. I think maybe hatred of people.
Okay. All right, you're right. That clarification, I see where you're coming from with that. Yes, what I meant and what my thought pattern is that if we teach our children to love people, to love each other, then we're off to a greater start. Because you're right. I mean, there's some things you want to hate being treated badly. But tolerance, and more than tolerance, I hate that word, because tolerance just means, okay, you just accept that I'm in the room. No, we need inclusion, and we need to be a part of. And so that takes it to another level. Yes, sir.
Thank you for the discussion. I really like your solutions and the acronym. My New Year's resolution was to try to understand people. And in America, everybody's getting so divided over everything, politics and religion, not just the black and white, but we have people, flat earth, and I'm thinking, I try to understand people, and I think that even when you say about the hatred, it's a good motivation for you, but I think in the acronyms it's saying try to understand even why people hate and understand where they're coming from. It's the only way that people really are going to get past, because and I don't want to ramble on, but the media, our leadership, everything, if we don't agree with something, they get rid of, or we separate into our own little holes.
Exactly.
Even social media, if you're not, well, I just like talking to like-minded people. Well, that just means I don't even want to hear from you. I had a cousin who said, hey, if you're not voting for so-and-so, then unfriend me. And I'm thinking, wow, you're really going to go far with that. And look where we are now. So,
well, and I mean, with the algorithms that are set up so that you see, the machine says, oh, she likes this, so let me send some more of the same thing. And so, preaching to the choir is easy. Preaching to the choir is easy. The tough part comes when you've got to talk to people who disagree with you, and to be able to engage in a conversation that's meaningful, and that hopefully, if you just listen, doesn't mean always, and that's the other thing too. Just because you're listening and you're doing active listening doesn't mean you're going to agree. Doesn't mean you're going to agree. There may be just some things that, we have to respectfully agree to disagree, and that's okay. But at least we're listening. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you were talking about the project, and what I was thinking about, because in New York we did what we call the Nehemiah Project, which brought the housing and change. But we also about the schools. You didn't mention, are they going to think about, what are they going to do about the schools?
Yes, we're working with a group called Purpose-Built Communities out of Atlanta, and their model is to really focus on the schools, creating a school that is high quality, that will bring people to the area. And so they start with the school and branch out from there. There are two elementary schools in the St. Paul's area, Tidewater Park Elementary and P.B. Young Elementary School, and both of those are going to be changed. Now, we don't have charter, I'm not even going to get into that discussion right now. I'm going to leave that alone. The school division is working with the city and with others and to determine what type of schools will be in that area.
And I'm hoping that in that conversation that they have some conversations where they really talk about the diversity that schools require and the different types of schools.
Absolutely.
Because it just seems to be that every child doesn't need a cookie cutter school. And it seems like a lot of the schools have
the same format.
And also another piece that doesn't seem to, is a parent piece that needs to be something that they talk a lot about. I always mandate that parents were involved.
Well, I think that's critical, because if you don't have parents involved in the school, then trying to educate the child and trying to understand the child and also trying to get the best outcomes becomes problematic. So I think you're right, that it is imperative that you have parents actively engaged in what's going on in the school. And I'll give you an example. When my daughter and I was a single parent, and my daughter and I moved here from Philadelphia, and we lived in Great Neck in Virginia Beach the first year that we moved here. And she went to Great Neck, John B. Dye Elementary School, and then Great Neck Middle. And I had a conference with the teacher at Great Neck Middle. And I'm one of these parents that when you come home, show me your papers, show me your tests, what is your homework, etc. So I was pretty up on where she was in terms of her grades. And the teacher, so we sat down and she says, Tiffany is really doing badly in my class. And I was like, well, that's strange, because no, I'm telling you, see, here are the C's, the D's, this is the kind of work. And I said, but every paper she's brought home, she said A's and B's. So I'm not understanding. Well, you must be mistaken, or she must be doing something, because I'm telling you, these are the grades. And I lived less than 5 minutes from the school, and I said, excuse me, but I'm going to go home, and I'm going to bring the papers back up, because there's a disconnect here that I'm not understanding. Well, you do what you have to do. So I went home and I got her folder, because that's where I kept all her papers, and looked at it again to make sure I wasn't crazy. A's and B's in the class. And we got back to the classroom and I laid the folder down and she said, Miss Hamm, at the time it was Miss That's another story. Miss Hamm, I am so sorry. I was looking at the wrong grades. I was looking at a different student. You know, now, in my radical mind, I'm telling you, I went straight to who's the other black kid in the class. Seriously. But I didn't say that. I just said, let me make sure that your books match these grades, you know, and that my daughter is doing okay. So we have to be involved. You have to be an advocate for your child. My sister, when I was telling you about my brother and sister, my mother worked for the school division in Baltimore, and so she knew of a special program that was going on in a section of town called Mount Washington. And you had to get permission to transfer out of your school area. And she really wanted Jackie to have the opportunity to take advantage of some of the special programs that they had there and so forth. And she went to the school, and the principal there did everything in her power to convince my mother not to transfer Jackie into the Mount Washington school. And my mother said, look, all I want is for my daughter to have an equal chance. You know what? That's all I want. Let her go into the class. If she can't cut it, then that's one thing. But I just want her to have an equal opportunity. And finally, after fighting and fighting and fighting, they let her in. So she went in 9th grade through a program through Johns Hopkins University, which allowed her to finish high school at the end of the 10th grade, which she went on to Towson State University for her undergrad, and then Loyola for her master's. So, but she had not fought, and that's why it's so critical for parents to be engaged and involved in their stories and advocate for their children. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, back to that St. Paul project. I'm sure they probably have, but it just hasn't been mentioned. That area of a lot of homeless people who, and they say they're trying to modernize that area. So what impact or things do they have or think they have in place to assist those individuals?
You know, that is a very good question, and I'm going to have to find out the answer to that. I do know that the city has the NEST program, which is the program where all the churches, each church takes a week and houses the homeless and feeds them on a regular basis. I don't know beyond that. So that's a really good question, and then in our meetings I will bring that up. So thank you, seriously. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Any other questions?
So,
Yes, ma'am.
You said that you came here from, when you moved to Tidewater, you moved here from
Philadelphia.
From Philadelphia. So when you came, did you ever have a kind of a shock? And was it
Well, I did. Let me tell you, it's two things. First of all, my mother is from Aberdeen, North Carolina. So I've had the southern experience. My daddy was from Baltimore, but never stepped foot outside of Baltimore. So I've had the big city experience too. Here's the thing with Philadelphia. Well, I can give you another example. When I first got there, my very first day at KYW in Philadelphia, I was coming from the garage, and I had to walk about a block and a half to the television station. And 5th and Market is where the Liberty Bell Museum is and so forth. And as I was walking, there was a car, I can't remember which street goes which direction, but at any rate, there was a guy in a vet, and he was trying to make a left-hand turn. And there was a pedestrian going across the street. And I guess the pedestrian was moving too slowly for this gentleman. So he pulls up the vet and he taps the guy's leg with the car. So the pedestrian kicks the car. The guy in the vet jumps out, throws his wallet on the seat, goes over, decks the pedestrian, gets back in his car and drives away. And I went, and why am I in the city of brotherly love? But I used to say to people when I came here, the difference to me between working in a city like Philadelphia and being here is that coming here, I know if someone doesn't like me because it's written all over their face. They're open about it. Up north, Barbara, you're just so wonderful. Stabbing me in the back the whole time. I mean, and that was, you know, for me, it was really a bit of more comfort to come this way. I like Hampton Roads. I mean, I've lived here twice. I lived here from '93 until 2003. I went back to Maryland with Chief Melvin High, if any of you guys remember him. He used to be a police chief in Norfolk. He became police chief for Prince George's County, Maryland Police Department, and his department and the Washington Post could not sit in the same room together. They were so antagonistic against each other. So I did media relations for them for 3 years. When I left, everybody was playing nicely. I can't say that, I don't know what they're doing today, but.
Well, I asked that question because I love being here. The quietness and the fact that I go back and forth to New York. But I have to go back there to get a sense of something, and I don't know what that is.
Well, I go back, because when I go home to Baltimore, I mean, it's funny, my whole driving habits change. My whole demeanor changes in terms of the way that you live. It's easier living here, I think, than it is to live in the city.
But I guess having been an educator, I want to see.
You want to see the big city lights?
No, I want to see, when I go to the schools, I don't want to see the same. It just seems like the kids are just not given the opportunities and the things that they could do.
You know, I was here before SOLs.
Yes.
And that just changed the entire dynamic of the schools here. It really did. It really did. Because we went from, you know, exploration and fun stuff and all that to just get this test.
So
and that's a shame.
I asked that question,
Yeah.
not because, I mean, I've met some great people here. I love my home. But the point is that when I go into schools and I meet children who are absolutely brilliant, but they don't fall where they, I mean, it's easy to sort of like get kids they don't seem to have much opportunity.
Much opportunity to do something.
So when I hear about what's happening, I've gone to visit Norfolk and I see the differences and the different ways that they're trying to address some of the issues. I think the education system here could really improve greatly.
I agree. I agree. Yes, ma'am.
One more time. Have you or your group ever considered having a forum in the city of Portsmouth?
A forum for the city. Oh, you mean the Racists Talk About It group? Or anything to bring the city of Portsmouth together. You know, it's funny. I've done a couple things here in Portsmouth. I did the
Voting.
the People for Portsmouth debate and the Martin Luther King debate. Okay, that was two totally different audiences. And I've also done, what else did I do over here recently? Those are the two things that come to mind immediately. But if you all invite me, I will come. I would be happy to do that. Any other questions? Yes?
I just wanted, it's my first time ever asking a question at one of these, so I'll just pretend I'm not over there doing that. But I just want to say also, fellow Philadelphian originally, moved down here in the 80s. And you said something that was amazing about not preaching to the choir, and that's easy, and getting out of your comfort zone. And for me, it wasn't just racial, but religious. So I'm Catholic and Jewish.
Oh, wow.
And when we moved down here in '87, we moved to Virginia Beach before I moved to Portsmouth. And within 2 weeks, I was beaten to a pulp by these, for lack of a better term, sort of hillbilly people. Now, mind you, Virginia Beach was very different in the '80s than now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was Jew boy. I couldn't believe the thing that was tremendous, and you probably remember from Philly. I mean, there's racism everywhere, but you would never think of it that way. Like they looked at me like I was, you know, had 3 eyeballs and a horn or something. So it was very weird, and it, I don't know, sort of underlined that it can take many forms.
You know, it's interesting now that you moved to Virginia Beach and then moved to Portsmouth, right? Because I moved to Virginia Beach, and when I bought in Norfolk. There was just something about
and I've lived there too for 5 years, so yeah, I've kind of bounced from Norfolk to Portsmouth in the last decade. So.
But you didn't go back to Virginia Beach.
Oh no.
There's some interesting times. I think Virginia Beach is trying to work on its community relations and bringing people together. They have a ways to go. But you know what? Every city, there are pockets in every single city in Hampton Roads, especially since he's taping this. No, but seriously, there are pockets in every city that have issues. And so the main message I want to leave with you on is 5 of, so I want to be respectful of the time. But just be courageous. Just be courageous. Because if we don't speak up, and we go home and we grouse and we got an ulcer and we're all upset and so forth, that's not helping. That's not helping anybody. But be courageous. Speak up if you see something wrong. Speak up if you see something right. If you see someone else say something to someone and you agree with them, then give them that piece of encouragement to just say, you know what, you were absolutely right. Thank you for speaking up. Just have courage. Because at the end of the day, we all have to figure out how we're going to survive on this planet and how we're going to come together. And we got everything from sea level rise and global warming. You see what happened with the weather last night and all of this stuff going on. And then we got to worry about whether or not we can get along as people. On top of that, that's a lot. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.